The morning sun blazed mercilessly over the Sonoran desert as Aiyana stumbled through the rocky terrain, her moccasined feet bleeding from the sharp stones. 3 days had passed since the tribal council's final judgment, since the shaman's condemning words had sealed her fate. "Barren woman brings curse to our people," he had declared, his weathered face hard as granite. "The spirits have marked her. She must go." At 23, Aiyana had been the wife of a respected warrior for 5 years, yet her womb remained empty, while other women her age nursed their second or third children. The whispers had grown louder with each passing season, the sideways glances more pointed. When the last harsh winter claimed several elders and newborns, the blame fell squarely on her shoulders. "Please," she had begged her husband, Nalnish, as the warriors gathered her meager possessions. "Give me one more season. Perhaps the spirits have spoken through your empty belly," he had replied coldly, unable to meet her eyes. "I take another wife before the moon is full. You are no longer Apache." The words cut deeper than any blade. To be Apache was everything: family, identity, purpose. Without it, she was nothing more than a ghost walking between worlds. Her water pouch had run dry yesterday. The desert's cruel beauty mocked her suffering as cacti bloomed in defiant colors while she withered. Buzzards circled overhead, patient scavengers waiting for the inevitable. Her tongue felt thick and swollen, her lips cracked like dried riverbed mud. Through the heat shimmer, she spotted something impossible: green, trees, water. Her desperate mind might be conjuring mirages, but she forced her trembling legs forward. Each step sent lightning bolts of pain through her feet, but she pressed on. The sound reached her first, the blessed trickle of running water over stones. Then she saw it. A small ranch house built of adobe and timber, weathered but sturdy. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, pumping water into a wooden trough where cattle gathered in the shade of cottonwoods. Tom McKenzie wiped sweat from his brow as he mended fence in the corral behind his modest ranch house. The Scottish accent still colored his thoughts, even after 8 years in Arizona territory. At 28, he had built this place from nothing after losing his parents and sister to consumption back in Glasgow. The loneliness pressed on him like the desert heat, constant, inescapable. He had tried taking a wife once, a merchant's daughter from Tucson, but she couldn't bear the isolation. "It's like living at the end of the world, Tom," she had said, before boarding the eastbound stage. Her body needs people, conversation, civilization. She wasn't wrong, but this harsh land had claimed his heart. Here, a man could build something lasting if he was willing to pay the price. Movement near the well caught his eye. At first, he thought it might be a wounded deer, the way the figure moved, desperate, unsteady. Then he saw her clearly, an Apache woman, young, collapsed beside his water trough. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands across her face, and her traditional dress was torn and dust-covered. Tom's hand instinctively moved to the rifle leaning against the fence post. Apache raids weren't uncommon, though this one was alone and clearly in no condition to pose a threat. Still, helping her could mean trouble with his neighbors, few as they were. The territorial government had a bounty on Apache scalps, and most folks didn't distinguish between hostile warriors and peaceful natives. But as he watched her struggle to lift her head to the water, her movements weak and desperate, his Christian upbringing won out over frontier pragmatism. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "We help those who need helping, Tommy. That's what makes us human." He approached slowly, speaking in the few Apache words he'd picked up from traders. "Peace. No harm." Aiyana's dark eyes widened with fear as the tall white man approached. His hair was the color of autumn wheat, his eyes blue as mountain lakes. He moved with the confident stride of someone at home in this unforgiving land, but his expression held no malice. When he knelt beside her, she tried to scramble away, but her body betrayed her. "Easy now," Tom said gently, switching to English, though he doubted she understood. "You need water." He cupped his hands, filled them from the trough, and offered them to her. Pride warred with desperation in Aiyana's chest. To accept help from a white man would make her exile complete, a final severing from her people. But the water gleamed in his palms like liquid diamonds, and her body screamed its need. She drank greedily, then immediately retched as her shrunken stomach rebelled. Tom steadied her with one hand, while using his bandana to wipe her face with the other. "Slow," he murmured, offering her smaller sips. "Too much too fast will make you sick." As her immediate thirst was quenched, Aiyana studied this unexpected savior. His face was kind but weathered, marked by sun and hard work. Calloused hands spoke of honest labor, and his clothes were practical rather than fine. Worn denims, a cotton shirt rolled to the elbows, scuffed boots. This was no wealthy landowner or soldier, just a working man trying to scratch out a living from the unforgiving desert. "What's your name?" Tom asked, not expecting an answer, but hoping to keep her calm. "Aiyana," she whispered, the word barely audible. Tom nodded, filing the name away. "Tom McKenzie, this is my ranch." He gestured at the modest spread around them. "You're safe here." The word safe hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and impossibility. Safety was a luxury neither of them had known for too long. Tom helped Aiyana to the shade of his small porch, her weight barely registering against his strong frame. She was lighter than she should be, her ribs visible through the torn fabric of her dress. How long had she been wandering the desert? "You need food," he said, more to himself than to her. "And those feet need tending." Aiyana understood more English than she let on. Years of trading encounters had taught her the white man's tongue, though she'd never had reason to speak it much. She watched warily as Tom disappeared into the adobe house, leaving her alone on the wooden bench he'd fashioned from cottonwood planks. The ranch spread before her like a green miracle in the brown vastness. Perhaps 30 head of cattle grazed in the distance, hardy breeds that could survive on desert grass and scarce water. A vegetable garden struggled behind the house, and she could see the clever irrigation channels Tom had dug to make the most of his precious well water. Tom returned with a bowl of cool water, clean rags, and a jar of what looked like honey. He knelt before her, gently lifting one of her injured feet. When she tried to pull away, he looked up at her with those startling blue eyes. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly. "My mother was a healer back in Scotland. She taught me a few things." His touch was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the cuts and thorns from her feet. The honey he spread on the wounds would fight infection, a wisdom she recognized from her own people's medicine. This white man knew more about healing than most. "Why?" The word slipped out before she could stop it, her English heavily accented but clear. Tom glanced up, surprised to hear her speak his language. "Why what? Why help me? Your people. My people." She gestured vaguely, indicating the vast gulf of hatred and mistrust between their races. Tom continued his careful ministration, considering his words. "My mother used to say that kindness doesn't see color, only need." He looked up at her again. "Besides, Jesus taught us to help strangers. Reckon that includes Apache women found dying at my well." Aiyana had heard of this Jesus from missionaries who sometimes visited Apache camps. A God of love and forgiveness, they claimed, though his followers often showed little of either quality. Yet here was this white man, living that teaching instead of just speaking it. "I am cast out," she said simply, "dead to my people. You risk much." Tom finished wrapping her feet in clean cloth and sat back on his heels. "Cast out for what?" Shame heated her cheeks. "I am barren, cannot give children. The shaman says I bring curse." Understanding dawned in Tom's eyes, followed by something that looked like anger. "That's barbaric. You're worth more than your ability to bear children." His words struck her like a physical blow. In her world, a woman's value was measured by her fertility, her ability to continue the bloodline. To hear a man, any man, suggest otherwise was almost incomprehensible. "You speak foolish words," she whispered. "Do I?" Tom stood and moved to the porch railing, gazing out at his struggling ranch. "I've been alone here for 3 years. Know what the townspeople say about me? That I'm cursed too, can't keep a woman, can't make the land prosper properly. Maybe they're right." The pain in his voice surprised her. This strong, capable man carried his own burdens of rejection and failure. "Your land prospers," she observed, looking at the green oasis he'd created. Tom snorted. "Barely. Lost half my herd to drought 2 summers back. The bank in Tucson keeps sending letters about my loan payments. Most months I choose between buying supplies or paying them." He turned back to her. "Point is, we're both outcasts in our own ways. Maybe that's why God put you at my well." As the day cooled toward evening, Tom prepared a simple meal of beans, hardtack, and coffee. Aiyana ate slowly, her shrunken stomach gradually accepting nourishment. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the desert, the coyotes beginning their nightly chorus. "I should go," Aiyana said eventually, though her body protested the idea of more walking. "Go where?" Tom asked practically. "You can't return to your people, and the desert will kill you before you reach anywhere else." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Stay a few days, until you're stronger." Then if you want to leave, I'll give you supplies and directions to the nearest town. The offer was more generous than she had any right to expect, yet something in his manner suggested he needed her presence as much as she needed his help. Loneliness was a language both of them spoke fluently. I work for food and shelter, she said firmly. I am not beggar. Tom smiled for the first time since finding her, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered features. Fair enough. Lord knows this place could use a woman's touch. Haven't had a proper meal or clean clothes in months. Over the next few days, Aiyana proved her worth many times over. She mended his torn shirts with neat stitches, organized his chaotic supplies, and cooked meals that actually had flavor. More importantly, she demonstrated knowledge of desert survival that amazed Tom. When 2 of his cattle fell sick with bloat, she brewed a tea from desert plants that eased their suffering. When his vegetable garden began wilting despite regular watering, she showed him how to mulch with dried grass and adjust his irrigation to prevent salt buildup. How do you know all this? Tom asked one evening as they watched his recovered cattle graze peacefully. My grandmother was medicine woman, Aiyana explained. She taught me plants, healing, ways of the desert before. She trailed off. Before you married? She nodded. Husband's mother said such knowledge was not needed. Women should focus on making babies, keeping house. Bitterness crept into her voice. Much good it did me. Tom studied her profile in the lamplight. Despite her recent ordeal, strength radiated from her like heat from stone. Her intelligence was obvious in how quickly she grasped his ranch's needs and found solutions. Any man would be lucky to have such a woman as a partner. The dangerous thought crossed his mind before he could stop it. He pushed it away, focusing on more practical matters. What will you do? He asked. When you're ready to leave, I mean. Aiyana was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. I do not know. There is nowhere for woman like me. The honesty in her words cut straight to his heart. He understood that feeling all too well, the sense of being caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. Perhaps that understanding was the beginning of something neither of them expected. 3 weeks had passed since Aiyana's arrival, and the McKenzie ranch had never run more smoothly. Tom found himself looking forward to their evening conversations on the porch, sharing stories of their vastly different childhoods. She spoke of growing up in wiki-ups that could be dismantled and moved with the seasons, while he described the cramped tenements of Glasgow, where his family had scraped by before sailing to America. Your mother, Aiyana said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, she would not approve of me being here. Tom considered this carefully. His mother had been a devout Presbyterian who believed in helping the less fortunate, but she'd also carried the prejudices of her time. She'd have fed you and tended your wounds, he said finally. The rest, well, she might have needed time to come around. Their comfortable routine shattered on a blazing Thursday morning when dust clouds announced approaching riders. Tom squinted through the heat shimmer and cursed under his breath. 3 men on horseback were heading straight for his ranch, and he recognized them all. Bill Crawford, Jake Morrison, and Deputy Marshal Pete Hutchins from Tucson. Get inside, he told Aiyana urgently. Stay away from the windows. But it was too late. Crawford had already spotted her hanging laundry on the line behind the house. His weathered face twisted into a sneer as he reined in his horse near the porch. Well, well, McKenzie, Crawford drawled, spitting tobacco juice into the dust. Heard you'd taken up with a squaw but didn't believe it till now. Tom stepped between Crawford and Aiyana, his jaw tight. State your business, Bill, then get off my land. Crawford was a cattle baron with a spread 10 times the size of Tom's, and he'd been trying to buy out the smaller ranches for years. His 2 companions flanked him. Morrison was his foreman, a cruel man with small eyes and quick fists, while Deputy Hutchins wore his badge like a license to bully anyone who couldn't fight back. Business is keeping decent folks safe from hostiles, Hutchins said, his hand resting on his gun butt. That there's an Apache woman, McKenzie. How do we know she ain't spying for raiders? Because she's been cast out from her tribe, Tom replied evenly. She's got nowhere else to go. Morrison laughed harshly. Cast out? Hell, that makes her even more dangerous. Got nothing to lose now. Aiyana stepped forward despite Tom's protective stance. She could feel the hatred radiating from these men like heat from a forge, but she wouldn't cower behind Tom like a frightened child. I am no spy, she said clearly in English, surprising the 3 visitors. I help this man with his ranch, nothing more. Crawford's eyes narrowed. It talks. Well, ain't that something? He leaned forward in his saddle. You listen good, squaw. We got families in these parts, women and children who don't sleep easy, knowing your kind is around. One hint of trouble, one cow gone missing, one raid anywhere in this territory, and we'll assume you had a hand in it. You threatening an innocent woman on my land. Tom's voice carried a dangerous edge. Just making sure everyone understands the situation, Hutchins said smoothly. Territory's been peaceful lately, and we aim to keep it that way. His gaze shifted between Tom and Aiyana. Course, a man gets lonely out here, maybe makes poor choices, but harboring hostiles is still a hanging offense. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Tom felt his temper rising but forced himself to stay calm. These men were looking for an excuse to cause trouble, and he wouldn't give them one. Aiyana's done nothing but help me improve this ranch, he said. My cattle are healthier, my garden's thriving, and I'm finally turning a profit. Seems to me that benefits everyone in the territory. Crawford snorted. Benefits you, maybe, but what happens when her Apache friends come calling, when they see how well you're treating one of theirs? He shook his head. You're playing with fire, McKenzie, and when it burns, it won't just be you who pays the price. The three men wheeled their horses and rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and unspoken threats. Tom watched until they disappeared, then turned to find Aiyana staring at the horizon with troubled eyes. They are right, she said quietly. My presence brings danger. Like hell it does. Tom's vehemence surprised them both. You've done nothing wrong. Neither have I. Wrong and dangerous are different things, Aiyana replied. If Apache raiders come, if anything bad happens, they will blame me. Blame you for helping me. That evening, as they sat on the porch in uneasy silence, Aiyana made a decision that had been building for days. The attraction between her and Tom had grown impossible to ignore. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the brief touches when they worked side by side, the conversations that stretched long into the night. Tom, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, I must tell you something. He turned to face her fully, noting the seriousness in her expression. The Apache believe I'm cursed because I cannot bear children. But, she took a shaky breath, I was never barren. My husband, Nalnish, he was injured in battle years ago, kicked by horse. The medicine man said his seed was damaged, but Nalnish could not accept this. Easier to blame wife than face truth. Tom stared at her in shock. Do you mean you let them cast you out for something that wasn't even your fault? What choice did I have? To speak against husband publicly would bring shame to his family, his clan. Better to accept blame and hope for mercy. Her voice turned bitter. There was no mercy. The injustice of it hit Tom like a physical blow. This brave, intelligent woman had sacrificed everything to protect her husband's honor, and he had repaid her with banishment and disgrace. Why tell me this now? He asked gently. Aiyana looked directly into his eyes, her own glistening with unshed tears. Because you deserve truth. Because those men today, they see something growing between us. And because, she faltered, then found her courage. Because I care for you, Tom McKenzie, more than is wise for a woman like me. The confession hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Tom reached out slowly, taking her hand in his calloused one. I care for you too, Aiyana. More than I should, probably more than is safe for either of us. As if summoned by their words, a coyote's howl echoed across the desert night, wild, lonesome, and full of longing. It was a sound that spoke to both their hearts, calling them toward something beautiful and dangerous, something that could either save them or destroy them both. The choice lay before them now, stark as the desert sunrise. They could continue as they were, walking the careful line between employer and employee, or they could step into unknown territory together, knowing that Crawford and his kind would be watching for any excuse to strike. The desert monsoons came early that summer, turning the dry arroyos into rushing torrents and the hard-pan earth into treacherous mud. Tom and Aiyana worked frantically to move the cattle to higher ground as flash floods threatened the ranch. During one particularly fierce storm, they took shelter in the barn, pressed close together for warmth as rain drummed on the tin roof. We should talk about what's happening between us, Tom said, his arm around her shoulders as lightning illuminated the barn interior. Aiyana nestled closer, feeling safe for the first time since her exile. In Apache culture, when man and woman choose each other, they simply begin living as married. No ceremony needed if families agree. But your family cast you out, Tom said gently, and mine's buried in Scotland. Then we have only ourselves to please, she replied, looking up at him with dark eyes that reflected the lightning flashes. Their first kiss happened naturally, inevitably, as if the storm outside had finally broken down the walls they'd built around their hearts. When they made love that night on the soft hay, it was with the desperate tenderness of two people who had found something precious in a world, determined to take it away. The change in their relationship was subtle but profound. They worked together with even greater harmony, their movements synchronized like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years. Aiyana's laughter returned, something Tom hadn't realized was missing until he heard it ringing across the ranch yard as she teased him about his terrible cooking. But their happiness couldn't remain hidden. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, the minister's wife from Tucson, arrived unannounced on a sweltering August afternoon, ostensibly to check on Tom's spiritual welfare. Her sharp eyes took in everything: Aiyana's presence in the house, the way they moved around each other with intimate familiarity, the obvious care they showed for one another. "Mr. McKenzie," she said crisply, accepting a glass of water on the porch, "I feel it's my Christian duty to warn you about the talk in town." Tom exchanged a glance with Aiyana, who was preparing to retreat inside. "What kind of talk, Mrs. Whitman? The kind that suggests you're living in sin with that woman?" Her voice dripped disapproval. "People are saying you've taken up with a heathen, that you're consorting with the enemy of all decent folk." "Aiyana's not my enemy," Tom said firmly. "She's been nothing but a blessing to this ranch." Mrs. Whitman's thin lips pursed. "A blessing? That's what you call it? Young man, that woman is Apache. Her people have murdered innocent settlers, burned homesteads, stolen children. How can you share your bed with such a creature?" Aiyana's face went pale, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped forward, her dignity intact despite the cruel words. "I understand your fear," she said in careful English, "but I am not my people, just as you are not responsible for every wrong done by white men. Judge me by my actions, not my blood." Mrs. Whitman recoiled as if Aiyana had struck her. "How dare you compare—" "That's enough," Tom interrupted, his voice hard as granite. "I won't have guests insulting my wife in my own home." The word wife hung in the air like a thunderclap. Mrs. Whitman's eyes widened in horror. "Your wife? You can't be serious. No Christian minister would perform such a ceremony, and no court would recognize such a union." "Apache law recognizes it," Tom said steadily, "and God's law speaks of love, not color. I reckon that's good enough for me." Mrs. Whitman rose abruptly, her face flushed with righteous indignation. "This is an abomination, Mr. McKenzie. Mark my words, no good will come of this unholy alliance." After she left in a cloud of dust and condemnation, Tom found Aiyana sitting by the well, staring at her reflection in the water. "You called me your wife," she said without looking up. "Do you mind?" he asked, settling beside her on the stone wall. "No, but it makes everything real now. Dangerous." She was right. Within a week, their troubles multiplied. The bank in Tucson suddenly demanded immediate payment on Tom's loan. The general store refused to sell him supplies. Deputy Hutchins began riding past the ranch daily, always finding some excuse to stop and search for signs of suspicious activity. The breaking point came when Tom rode into town for supplies and found Crawford holding court outside the saloon, regaling a crowd with his version of recent events. "McKenzie's lost his damn mind," Crawford was saying, his voice carrying across the dusty main street. "Living with that Apache whore like she's some kind of proper wife. Hell, probably passing along information to every hostile within 100 miles. Tom dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his gun belt. The crowd noticed his approach and fell silent. "You got something to say about my wife, Bill. Say it to my face." Crawford turned, his hand also moving toward his weapon. "Wife? That's rich, McKenzie. You can't marry a damn savage. Might as well try wedding a coyote." The insult hit Tom like a physical blow. "Apologize for speaking about my wife that way." "Or what?" Crawford sneered. "You'll shoot me over a squaw?" "I'll defend my family's honor, same as any man would." For a moment, the two men faced each other in the dusty street, while the crowd held its breath. Then Crawford's common sense overcame his pride. Tom McKenzie might be misguided, but he was also fast with a gun and had nothing left to lose. "This ain't over," Crawford said, backing down but trying to save face. "That woman brings trouble, and when it comes, don't expect any help from decent folk." Tom rode home that evening to find Aiyana waiting anxiously on the porch. She read the story in his grim expression. "It's getting worse, isn't it?" she asked. "We'll manage," he said, pulling her into his arms. "Together, we can handle whatever comes." But that night, as they lay entwined in their bed, both wondered if love would be enough to overcome the hatred arrayed against them. Outside, Coyotes sang their wild songs to the desert moon, and somewhere in the darkness, enemies plotted their downfall. 3 months later, Aiyana's morning sickness confirmed what they both hoped and feared. She was carrying Tom's child. The joy they shared was tempered by the knowledge that their situation had become even more precarious. A mixed-blood child would be accepted by neither culture, faced with prejudice from both sides. But as Tom placed his hand on her still flat belly and felt the promise of new life beneath, he knew with absolute certainty that he would fight the world itself to protect his growing family. "Our child will be loved," he whispered against her hair. "Whatever else happens, this baby will know love." In the distance, thunder rumbled across the desert, promising another storm. But Tom and Aiyana faced it together, their love a beacon of hope in the gathering darkness. The winter of 1883 brought unusual hardship to Arizona Territory. Snow fell in the high desert, and bitter winds howled through the canyon passes. Aiyana, now 6 months pregnant, moved carefully around the ranch house as she prepared for the birth of their first child. Tom had expanded the house over the summer, adding a second bedroom and reinforcing the walls against both weather and potential attackers. The threats from Crawford and his supporters had escalated to nighttime raids on their property, fences cut, cattle scattered, and once shots fired through their kitchen window while they slept. "We could leave," Tom said one evening as he cleaned his rifle by lamplight. "Head north to Colorado or west to California. Start fresh where nobody knows us." Aiyana looked up from the baby clothes she was sewing. "Run from our home? From the life we've built? It's not running if it keeps our family safe," Tom replied, though his heart wasn't in the words. This ranch represented everything he'd worked for, everything he'd dreamed of when he first came to America. "My grandmother used to say that the desert teaches patience," Aiyana said, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Those who try to force their will upon it perish, but those who learn to work with it thrive." Before Tom could respond, the sound of approaching horses cut through the night. Too many horses, moving too fast. Tom extinguished the lamp and grabbed his rifle, motioning for Aiyana to move away from the windows. "McKenzie!" Crawford's voice bellowed across the yard. "Come out here!" Tom peered through a crack in the shutters. At least a dozen men sat on horseback in his yard, their faces hidden by bandanas. Torches cast dancing shadows, making them look like demons risen from hell. "We know you're in there with that squaw," another voice shouted. "Time to end this abomination." "Tom," Aiyana whispered, her face pale with fear, "they mean to kill us." He looked at his pregnant wife, at the home they'd built together, at everything they stood to lose. Then something shifted inside him. Not desperation, but a cold, hard resolve. "Not tonight," he said grimly, "and not ever." Tom opened the front door slowly, his rifle visible but not immediately threatening. "What do you want, Crawford?" "Justice," Crawford replied, his torch held high. "That Apache witch has cursed this whole territory. Ever since you took her in, we've had drought, disease among the cattle, and talk of raids from Mexico. Time to cleanse the land." "The only curse around here is ignorance and hatred," Tom said evenly. "Now get off my property before someone gets hurt." Deputy Hutchins urged his horse forward. "You're harboring a hostile, McKenzie. That makes you an enemy of the territory. We're here to arrest her." "On what charges?" Tom demanded. "Espionage, conspiracy with enemy forces, corruption of a white man," Hutchins rattled off. "Take your pick." Tom's laugh was bitter. "Those are lies, and you know it." "Lies or not, she's coming with us," Crawford said. "One way or another." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Tom knew he couldn't fight a dozen men, but he also knew what arrest meant for an Apache woman in Hutchins' custody. She would never make it to trial. Then Aiyana appeared beside him in the doorway, her dignity intact despite her fear. "I will come," she said clearly, "but I am pregnant with this man's child. If you harm me, you harm an innocent baby." "Half-breed spawn," Morrison spat. "World's better off without it." Tom's rifle swung toward Morrison with deadly intent. "Say another word about my child, and I'll put a bullet between your eyes." The tension exploded into chaos. Morrison went for his gun, Tom fired, and suddenly the night erupted with muzzle flashes and shouts. Tom dragged Aiyana back into the house as bullets splintered the doorframe. "The root cellar," he said urgently, pushing her toward the trapdoor he'd built in the kitchen floor. "Hide there until it's over." "I won't leave you. Our baby needs its mother alive," Tom said firmly. "Go." The siege lasted until dawn. Tom fought from different windows, making it seem like he had more defenders than just himself. He wounded 2 men and killed Morrison before running out of ammunition. As the sun rose, painting the desert in soft pastels. Crawford called for a parley. "It's over, McKenzie. Come out with your hands up." Tom knew he was beaten, but he wasn't finished. As he stepped onto the porch, his hands raised but his head high, he saw something that made his heart soar. Dust clouds on the horizon, riders approaching fast. The cavalry patrol arrived just as Hutchins was preparing to hang Tom from his own porch beam. Lieutenant Samuel Morrison, no relation to the dead man, surveyed the scene with professional eyes and immediate disgust. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded. Crawford tried to bluster his way through an explanation, but the lieutenant had seen enough vigilante justice to recognize it. Moreover, he knew Tom McKenzie by reputation, a hard-working rancher who'd never caused trouble and often helped supply the cavalry with beef. "This man is under military protection," Morrison declared. "Anyone who harms him or his family will answer to the U.S. Army." The would-be lynch mob dispersed sullenly, but not before Crawford leaned close to Tom and whispered, "This isn't over. Army won't always be around to protect you." After the cavalry left, Tom found Aiyana in the root cellar, pale but unharmed. They held each other in the ruins of their kitchen, surrounded by broken glass and bullet holes, knowing they had survived but at great cost. "We can't stay," Aiyana said finally. "Not anymore." Tom nodded reluctantly. "California, then? I hear there's good ranching land in the valleys north of Los Angeles." They left Arizona Territory 3 weeks later, selling the ranch to a cattle company for far less than it was worth. The journey west was hard on Aiyana in her advanced pregnancy, but Tom was careful to choose routes through friendlier territory. Their first child, a daughter they named Sarah, was born in a wagon camp outside Bakersfield. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes, a beautiful symbol of two worlds united in love. Over the next 5 years, 3 more children followed, twin boys named James and Joseph, and another daughter, Rebecca. Each birth proved wrong the Apache beliefs about Aiyana's barrenness, and each child grew up bilingual, learning both English and Apache, Christian prayers and native stories. Tom built a new ranch in the San Joaquin Valley, where the soil was rich and water plentiful. Their neighbors were a mixed lot, other immigrants from various countries who were too busy building their own lives to worry much about the McKenzie's unusual family. Crawford had been right about one thing: their story didn't end in Arizona, but he'd been wrong about everything else. Love had not only survived the hatred arrayed against it, it had flourished, creating something beautiful and lasting. On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they watched their 4 children play in the golden California sunshine, Aiyana took Tom's weathered hand in hers. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "All we went through, all we lost?" Tom looked at their thriving ranch, their healthy children, the woman who had transformed his life from empty existence into joyful purpose. The answer came easily. "Never," he said, kissing her forehead. "Not for a single day." The desert wind might have scattered them from Arizona, but it had also carried the seeds of their love to fertile ground where it could grow without limit. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all, not just surviving the hatred, but proving that love could indeed conquer all.